3 hours and many heated exchanges later, an emergency plan was approved. The HOA would fund not only the rebuilding of James's Cattle Bridge, but also enhance it with modern flood control features. Additionally, they would create a conservation easement along the creek, acknowledging the crucial role of natural watershed management. As people filed out, many stopped to shake James's hand or quietly apologize. Gerald approached last, looking haggard. "Elaine has resigned," he said simply. "The board would like to offer you a consulting position on environmental management. Paid, of course." James considered this for a moment. "I'm not much for meetings, Gerald, but I'm happy to share what I know." 1 month later, construction began on the new bridge, designed by an environmental engineer, but incorporating his grandfather's original principles. It stood as a blend of old wisdom and new technology. A small plaque, installed without fanfare, read, "Holloway Crossing, honoring the past, protecting the future." The following spring, as wildflowers bloomed along the newly restored creek banks, James leaned on the bridge railing watching his cattle graze peacefully on both sides of the water. Ethan, home for summer break, joined him. "Heard Elaine's house finally sold," his son mentioned, "at quite a discount." James nodded. New owners seemed nice. Young couple with kids. They asked if their children could fish in the creek sometime. "What you say?" Told them what Grandpa always said, "The creek belongs to itself. We're just visitors." A beat of comfortable silence passed between them as they watched the water flow beneath the bridge, controlled but not conquered. "You know," Ethan said finally, "you could have fought harder from the beginning. Taken her to court." James smiled, patting his son's shoulder. "Sometimes the most satisfying victories are the ones nature delivers herself. No lawyers required." In the distance, storm clouds gathered over the mountains, promising summer rain. But this time, everyone along Willow Creek could rest easy, knowing that the water would flow as it was meant to, guided by human hands, but following its own ancient wisdom. "Just documenting the environmental restoration," she called out cheerily. "This will make a wonderful before and after for our community newsletter." Ethan muttered something under his breath, and James shot him a warning look before approaching the fence. "You got what you wanted," he said evenly. "Bridge is coming down." Elaine nodded approvingly. "The creek will look so much more natural now. We're thinking of featuring it in the Meadowbrook Estates Living with Nature brochure." "You know," James said, leaning on his sledgehammer, "my grandfather built this bridge for a reason." "I'm sure it was very practical for your agricultural activities," she replied, her tone making agricultural sound like a dirty word. "Partly," James acknowledged, "but also because he understood this creek. He grew up swimming in it, fishing in it. He knew its moods." "Its moods?" Elaine echoed, looking amused. "Willow Creek floods, Ms. Winters. It always has. These posts, the way they're positioned, they catch debris that would otherwise rush downstream during heavy rains. Creates a natural filtration system. Slows the current too." The photographer had stopped taking pictures, suddenly interested in the conversation. "That sounds like rural superstition to me," Elaine said dismissively. "Our development has a state-of-the-art drainage system. The HOA paid a fortune for it." James nodded toward her property. "Your house sits at the lowest point of the natural floodplain. Might want to check your insurance policy. Make sure it covers acts of God, or in this case, acts of HOA." For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across Elaine's face before she regained her composure. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Holloway?" "No, ma'am," James replied, turning back to his work. "Just passing along some local knowledge. Free of charge." As they drove away, Ethan helped his father pull the last post from the creek bed. They watched the water flow freely, unimpeded for the first time in over 50 years. "Dad," Ethan asked, "what happens when the spring rains come?" James looked toward Elaine's sprawling 3-story colonial with its pristine landscaping and newly installed in-ground pool. "Nature finds its own level, son. Always does." The meteorologist on Channel 5 could barely contain his excitement. "We're looking at a possible record-breaking rainfall event, folks. This slow-moving system could dump as much as 15 inches over the next week. Residents in low-lying areas should take precautions immediately. James watched the forecast from his living room, phone already buzzing with text messages from concerned neighbors. Outside, Willow Creek had already risen 6 inches since morning. Its normally clear water now a churning brown soup carrying twigs and leaves downstream. The first call from Elaine came at 10:23 p.m. as the third consecutive thunderstorm rolled through. Your creek is overflowing its banks. Her voice competed with the sound of rain hammering on her roof. Not my creek, James replied calmly. Natural waterway, remember? That's what all your paperwork said. Don't play games with me. My basement has 3 inches of water already, and it's still rising. You need to do something. Like build a structure to control the water flow, James suggested. Maybe some sort of bridge that would catch debris and slow the current. The line went dead. By morning, the situation had deteriorated dramatically. James pulled on his rain gear and waded through ankle-deep water to check on his cattle, safely relocated to the barn. From this vantage point, he could see the Meadowbrook Estates area clearly, particularly the row of luxury homes backing onto the creek. Elaine's property was now a lake. The carefully manicured lawn had disappeared under a foot of muddy water that lapped at her back patio. Her expensive landscaping, imported Japanese maples and ornamental grasses, floated like sad, drowned creatures. The in-ground pool had overflowed, its blue water now indistinguishable from the brown flood surrounding it. As James watched, a fire truck pulled up to her driveway, emergency lights painting the rain-soaked scene in surreal flashes of red. Men in yellow slickers deployed pumps and sandbags in what already looked like a losing battle. His phone rang again. This time, it was Mike from the county. James Holloway wiped sweat from his brow as he hammered the last nail into the repaired slat of his grandfather's cattle bridge. At 42, his hands were calloused from 15 years of maintaining the family's 15-acre homestead that had somehow survived the suburban sprawl of Meadowbrook Estates. The developer had tried to buy him out 3 times, each offer more tempting than the last. But James couldn't put a price tag on the land, where 4 generations of Holloways had raised cattle. Willow Creek bubbled beneath him, a silver ribbon cutting through his property before winding into the manicured lawns of the mixed mansions that now surrounded him on 3 sides. The contrast was jarring, his weathered red barn against the backdrop of beige stucco and stone veneer homes with 3-car garages. You're living in the past, James, his sister often told him during her visits from Chicago. Maybe she was right, but this past fed his soul in ways his corporate job never had before he quit to take over the farm. The bridge had stood for over 50 years, withstanding floods, droughts, and now the inexorable march of suburbia. James ran his hand along the worn wood, feeling the grooves and knots that told the story of countless cattle crossings. His grandfather had built it during the summer of '72, a project that brought the whole family together. James had been just a boy then, handing nails to the adults and feeling important. Now, he was the keeper of this legacy, this small piece of authenticity in an increasingly artificial landscape. From his perch on the bridge, James could see the changes that had transformed the surrounding countryside. Where once there had been the Peterson farm to the east and the old Miller place to the north, now there were rows of identical homes with perfectly trimmed hedges and patios, featuring outdoor kitchens that rarely saw use. The night sky, once a canvas of stars, now competed with security lights and the ambient glow of flat-screen TVs visible through large bay windows. A flock of geese passed overhead, their honking a reminder that some things remained wild, despite human efforts to contain and control. James watched them disappear over the tree line, wondering if they noticed how the land beneath them changed with each migration. The sound of throat clearing interrupted his thoughts. A woman in crisp white linen pants and a pastel cardigan stood on the opposite bank, arms crossed, designer sunglasses perched on her head. Her platinum blonde hair was cut in what his late wife would have called a speak to the manager bob. "Excuse me," she called, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I'm Elaine Winters, the new HOA president. I don't believe that structure is up to code." James straightened up, sizing up the woman who would soon become his nemesis. Ma'am, this bridge has been here since Nixon was president. It was up to code before there was a code. Well, she replied with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Things change. I just moved into the Riverside property downstream. I paid $1.2 million for unobstructed views, not to look at. She gestured dismissively. Cattle infrastructure. As if on cue, Bessie, his oldest Holstein, mooed loudly from the pasture, making Elaine jump. James bit back a smile. Welcome to the country, Ms. Winters, he said, tipping his worn baseball cap. Hope you don't mind the smell of manure in the spring. It's good for the roses. Elaine's nose wrinkled slightly, her French manicure beaming as she clutched her designer handbag tighter. Mr. Holloway, I understand you've been grandfathered in, so to speak, but surely we can come to some arrangement that better suits the aesthetic of our community. Our community? James echoed, emphasizing the "our" with a hint of amusement. Ms. Winters, my family was growing crops here when your community was nothing but forest and forgotten dreams. This isn't about aesthetics, it's about function. My cattle need to cross. A red-tailed hawk swooped low over the creek, catching a fish in its talons before soaring away. Elaine flinched at the sudden movement, but James didn't even blink. He was part of this ecosystem in a way she could never understand. The HOA board meets next Tuesday, she said, regaining her composure. I think it would be beneficial for you to attend. We'll be discussing watershed management and property line compliance. James recognized the veiled threat in her words. He'd seen her type before. Newcomers who arrived with blueprints and bulldozers, determined to reshape the world to match their vision, regardless of what had been there before. Tuesday's cattle auction day, he replied evenly. But I appreciate the invitation. She studied him for a moment, as if trying to determine if his refusal was a deliberate challenge. The creek gurgled between them, a natural boundary between two worlds colliding. Finally, she turned to leave, her expensive shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth of the bank. We'll be in touch, Mr. Holloway, she called over her shoulder. Change is inevitable, you know. James watched her retreat toward her sprawling colonial home, its white columns visible through the trees. So is nature, Ms. Winters, he murmured to himself. So is nature. The certified letter arrived exactly 1 week later. James recognized the HOA letterhead even before opening the official-looking envelope. Inside was a 3-page notice citing 17 alleged violations, complete with color photographs of his property taken at unflattering angles. His cattle bridge was highlighted in red, with arrows pointing to structural concerns and environmental impact areas. That evening, as James sat at his kitchen table reviewing the letter, his phone buzzed. It was Dan Peterson, his neighbor from the days before Meadowbrook Estates existed, now living in a retirement community 30 miles away. Heard the new HOA dragon is breathing fire your way, Dan chuckled. News travels fast, James replied, taking a swig of his beer. Small town, big mouths. Listen, that woman's making waves everywhere. Got herself elected by promising to enhance property values through aggressive compliance measures. She's already forced the Johnsons to tear down their kids' treehouse and made old Mrs. Rivera remove her garden gnomes. She can try, James said. My property's grandfathered in. That's the thing. Dan's voice turned serious. She's got connections at the county. Her husband plays golf with the commissioner. Word is, she's found some loophole about watershed management that might override your exemptions. 2 days later, James opened his door to find a county inspector with a clipboard and an apologetic expression. Sorry about this, James, said Mike, who'd gone to high school with James's younger brother. Politics, you know. She's pushing for a comprehensive watershed review. As Mike took measurements and soil samples near the bridge, James spotted Elaine watching from her deck through binoculars, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. The final blow came when James's lawyer, after reviewing the mounting paperwork, delivered the bad news. They're exploiting a technicality, she explained. The bridge was never properly permitted according to a 1983 ordinance. Yes, it predates the ordinance, but the grandfather clause required registration within 5 years. which your grandfather never completed. Fighting this could cost upwards of $30,000, with no guarantee of success. As James stared at the estimated legal fees, Elaine's voice echoed in his head. I paid $1.2 million for unobstructed views. For her, this battle was pocket change. For him, it was a financial abyss. The dismantling of the bridge took place on a crisp autumn morning. Each crack of splintering wood felt like a physical blow to James's chest. His teenage son, Ethan, home from college for the weekend, worked silently alongside him, occasionally glancing toward Elaine's property with poorly disguised contempt. Dad, this is bull language. James cut him off, though his heart wasn't in it. Sometimes you have to pick your battles, son. By midday, only the support posts remained, jutting from the water like broken teeth. James was working on removing one when he noticed the silver Mercedes pulling up to the fence line. Elaine emerged. You seeing this, James? It's a disaster zone down there. Watching it now, James confirmed. How bad? Elaine's basement is completely flooded. Water's reached her first floor. She's demanding emergency services, claiming you sabotaged the creek. James laughed despite himself. By removing a bridge she legally forced me to take down. Yeah, well, she's not big on irony, Mike replied. Listen, I've got to ask, did your grandfather ever document the flood control function of that bridge? Any permits, studies, anything? Better, James said. He kept records of every major flood since 1952. Photographs, water levels, rainfall amounts. Shows the difference before and after the bridge was built. And I've got his original designs, with calculations for water flow reduction. There was a pause on the line. You might want to dig those out, Mike said finally. County's going to need to see them. And James, maybe hold off on saying, I told you so at the emergency meeting tomorrow. The Meadowbrook Estates Community Center had never been so packed. Folding chairs spilled out into the hallway, where damp, exhausted homeowners strained to hear the proceedings inside. At the front table sat the HOA board, minus Elaine, who was reportedly staying at the Marriott while industrial fans dried out her home. Commissioner Davis, visibly uncomfortable in his suit and tie, addressed the room. The county has declared a disaster area for the southeastern portion of Meadowbrook Estates. FEMA representatives will be here tomorrow to begin assessment for federal aid. A man in the second row stood up. My insurance is calling this an avoidable man-made disaster and denying coverage. They're saying the HOA is liable for removing flood control structures. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The vice president of the HOA, a retired accountant named Gerald, cleared his throat nervously. We've asked Mr. Holloway to join us today to, provide some historical context. All eyes turned to James, who sat quietly in the corner with a weathered leather portfolio on his lap. He made his way to the front without rushing, taking his time as conversations hushed around him. Folks, I'm not here to place blame, he began, opening the portfolio on the table. My family's lived alongside Willow Creek for over 100 years. We've learned its ways, mostly through trial and error. He spread out black and white photographs showing historical floods, alongside his grandfather's meticulous drawings of the bridge design. This structure wasn't just for my cattle. It was engineered specifically to mitigate downstream flooding. The hydrologist hired by the county stepped forward, pointing to the designs. This is remarkable work for someone without formal training. Your grandfather essentially created a debris catch and flow regulator that, according to our models, reduced downstream water volume by approximately 40% during peak events. So removing it caused our homes to flood? A woman asked angrily. It was certainly a contributing factor, the hydrologist confirmed. The meeting erupted into chaos, with homeowners demanding answers and compensation. Gerald repeatedly banged his gavel until order was restored. The HOA will be reviewing all decisions made regarding Mr. Holloway's property, he announced. In the meantime, we need immediate solutions.